It's Jody with All About the Harvest, where I teach you how to grow, use, and preserve your harvest. And today I'm coming at you with a week number 2 update on the Every Bit Counts challenge. This is a challenge that is done in the month of August, where every day you try to preserve something however you see fit. So this week I'm going to tell you what I did, and hopefully I will inspire you to preserve your food as well. So like last week, I had some eggshells. I took those eggshells and I dried them, and then I put them in here to save to powder to add to my potting soil mix. If you want to know how I go about doing that, I will link that video up above, and then I'll also have it in the description below. The next thing that I do very similar is I save our coffee grounds. So when we make coffee, I save the coffee grounds, I let them dry, and then I just put them in a coffee container that I know is for used grounds. I put them in here, and then I will use this for my potting soil mix as well, also some other plants that like acid, so I'll use that for that. So something that I did this week with coffee that I didn't do last week is I made coffee ice cubes. So I will take coffee that we didn't drink or didn't use, and I will make ice cubes. So I basically just freeze them in ice cube trays, and then I put them in their own bag in the freezer. And then whenever I make my coffee, I will use those ice cubes to cool it down. Typically, I like to always have some coffee ice cubes, and I ran out last week, so I made some additional coffee cubes. And again, this is just with the leftover coffee that we didn't drink. Another thing that I did this week is my husband had a banana, and I took the peels and put them in water. With that water, I made a potassium water for my plants. So I watered my plants with that. I did that 2 days in a row. Then after that, I took it out and I put it on the dehydrator, and then I dehydrated those peels. And these I will grind into powder that I'll also use for my plants and potting soil mix. That's something similar I did last week. I did dehydrate the peels last week, but I didn't make the water. So that's something new that I did. Now, if you're interested in other ways to use banana peels for your plants and fertilizer, I go a little bit more in detail on that, and I'll link that video up above. I'll also link it in the description below so you can check it out later. The next thing I did, which I had done the week before, is I dehydrated elderberries. Again, I have 4 elderberry bushes in my berm. This week, I didn't get that much from an elderberry perspective. There was about this much in this jar from the last week, and so I got about this much. I'll probably get enough to fill this jar again, but I did dehydrate elderberries this week. So that was another thing that I did. If you're interested in how to use elderberries or what to do with them, I have an elderberry playlist. I will link it up above, and I'll also put it in the description below. So something that I showed you last week and I asked your opinion on were these garlic scape tops. They're these little bulbills, and if you remember, this whole container was full of them. If you're not really sure what I was talking about, you can go ahead and watch my last week's video on week 1 of the Every Bit Counts challenge, and I'll link it up above, and then I'll link it in the description below. We had these little bulbills. These are very, very strong. When my husband's friend came over to help us with the berm, I had given him some, and he thought they were really good. He said that they were super strong and liked it. So my husband took them with him and his friends on a guy's golfing weekend this weekend, and they are going to be using them in garlic mashed potatoes and in a couple other recipes. But before they did that, I managed to preserve them. And here's how I did it. So I took the garlic little bulbills, and I put them in these 2 ice cube trays. Now, these 2 ice cube trays are really, really small, and I did that on purpose. These actually came from my 2 little fridges that I have in the garage, you know, like the mini fridges that you might see in dorm rooms. And so each one of them came with their own little ice cube trays. And I thought, oh, this will be perfect. I thought just for using these bulbills, you know, you're not gonna want a lot. What I did is I put the little garlic bulbills in here, and then I filled them with olive oil, and then I froze them. Then when I took them out, I put them in a Ziploc bag in the freezer so that when we need them, we can just take them out and throw them in the pan. And so you have the olive oil already, and then you have the garlic. We can use them in recipes that way. So that is how I preserved those last week. Now, one of the tips, if you're interested in doing something like that, one of the things that I realized was when you're doing olive oil, it's not like a liquid where it easily cracks out. So they didn't really crack out of here. I had to wait for them to kind of soften and kind of start to melt a little bit before these came out, which got a little messy. So what I would probably do next time is use one of these trays that have those little silicone kind of rubber bottoms so that you can just push them out. So that way then I'm not waiting for them to melt. So that's what I would use if I were to do this again in the future. If you're thinking about doing it, I would suggest using one of these that you can push out. So one of the other things I did this week is I have a pepper plant that has these snacking peppers on it. They're super sweet. They're called sweet snacking peppers. They are delicious. What I did is I took one of them and I took the seeds and I'm drying the seeds. So I'm saving the seeds for next year. So that's a food preservation thing I'm doing. The next thing I did was I dehydrated some chives. So I have 2 different jars here. The chives in this jar were from my chives that I have in a pot. And I have 2 different pots where I just cut the chives from. But last year, at the end of the year, I must have put some chives in my garden and they came up this year, but they're much bigger. So the ones in the pots, they're very thin like a chive, but the ones in the garden almost look like onion greens. So they're a little bit bigger. So I separated them. I might actually pull one of them up and see if they're like little onions under there. I'm not really sure. I don't remember planting them, which is kind of funny, but they taste like a chive. So I dehydrated the ones in the garden and the ones in the pots. So I did that this week. So we had a lot of peppers this year. So a friend that came over and helped us with the berm, I gave him 15 jalapenos that he was using for the guys' weekend for golfing, and he was gonna make jalapeno poppers with those. And then I did harvest some jalapenos for us to make some jalapeno poppers this week that we did eat. I wanted to test freezing some poppers. So I did freeze some. I'm going to test them and see how they are when they are made from frozen. So typically I just make mine fresh, but I also use sweet banana peppers. And I do that because sweet banana peppers aren't as hot, obviously, as jalapenos. When I made these a few weeks ago, I froze the banana peppers because we had more banana peppers. And so I froze the banana peppers, and when I went to make them again from frozen, they were more like mush, and I didn't really care for them. So this time when I made poppers, I did just the jalapeno ones, and they're in the freezer. So they're being preserved. It's a test batch because if this works, then I will be freezing more jalapeno poppers because we really do enjoy them. If you have any tips and tricks on freezing jalapeno poppers or what you do when you reheat them, please put that in the comments below because I'm really looking for a way. And then I did some canning projects. So I was able to get in some time to do some canning projects, and I want to tell you a little bit about them. I made the pickled banana pepper ring recipe. So my sister really likes pickled banana peppers on her salads and things like that. I had a lot of sweet banana peppers. So what I did is I went to the National Center for Home Food Preservation. You can Google National Center for Home Food Preservation, and they have a website. If you go there and you type in pickled yellow pepper rings, you will get this recipe, and I just printed it out and I made that recipe. The National Center for Home Food Preservation is a safe canning resource. If you have any questions on how to can, in the comments below, I will have my canning course that you can start and take today. I ended up canning 8 pints and 1 12-ounce jar of the pickled banana pepper rings. I also had a lot of jalapenos, even though I gave 15 away to our friend, and then we made poppers and we froze some poppers. I still had jalapenos left. So my husband said years ago somebody that he worked with made a jalapeno jelly that he really liked. He hasn't had it in years and he'd like to have it. So I found a jalapeno jelly recipe. The jalapeno jelly recipe I followed is in the Ball Blue Book. Now this is the newest version of the Ball Blue Book. This came out this year in 2024. So if you're using the older version, you need to get the new version. They do have new recipes, but they also changed things that they found were inaccurate or not safe. This is the book that you want to start using from Ball. Don't use the 2020 version, you want to use the 2024 version. The only place I currently found this is at Walmart or at Meijer, but it might be at other stores as well in the canning section, so check them out. But make sure you find the one that has the blue front. And on page 59 is the jalapeno jelly recipe. And this says it yields about 5 half-pint jars. I got 7 half-pint jars and then probably like a 4-ounce amount left. And that 4-ounce amount, I just put in a container and I put it in the fridge for us to have. And then here's just like a little side tip. Whenever I make recipes, I will either, if it's in a book like this, I'll put it on a sticky note, or if it's in one like this that I can print out, I just write on the actual recipe itself. So every time I make a canning recipe, I'll put how much it yielded so that I know for future, and then I'll put any other notes. So for example, with this pickled yellow pepper rings, it said 2.5 to 3 pounds of yellow banana peppers. And in here, I said I used 2.5 pounds of cut up peppers, so they were weighed after I cut them up, and that made 8 pints and 1 12-ounce jar. So I needed to make a double batch of liquid. The liquid that this calls for was only enough for half of that batch. So I know the next time I make this recipe, if I'm gonna use 2.5 pounds of banana peppers, that this is going to yield about the same, but I have to double the amount of liquid. So I'll just do that instead of having to stop midway through. So the other thing I have on my list that I made was I froze some basil stems and some flowers and some leaves. Those I will actually use when I make my bone broths. So I hope that gives you some inspiration on what you can preserve this week or in the future. Put in the comments below what you did this week so I can get some inspiration from you as well. Again, this is Jody with All About the Harvest, where I teach you how to grow, use, and preserve your harvest. And until next week, happy preserving.